needs an enema.
I think it's a fabulous way to spend your spare time.
Tell you what, I'll take Miss Barrett back to her apartment and check her out.
Thank you.
Here we have one of the many establishing shots in the movie. This is a transitional shot between scenes, and it shows the top half of Dana Barrett's building. As a matte painting, it's incredibly flat, slightly overexposed, and it lacks definition and depth. So we're going to tweak this by giving it depth and definition, and just to bring it to life a little bit, we'll composite some birds in flight.
Okay, who brought the dog?
And that brings us on to the Terror Dog. Now, problems. The Terror Dog is a stop-motion animated model which has been superimposed onto a live-action background. The only problem here is it suffers from an opacity problem. It's almost 50% transparent, you can see the background through it, and it loses so much of its detail. It looks more like a plasticine model rather than the Terror Dog. So we're going to go forward through the movie and find an appropriate angle of the Terror Dog's face. We're going to grab a few frames of that, preferably when it's in motion, and we're going to superimpose that. Obviously we've motion tracked it so that there isn't an issue with it following the same trajectory. Next we have an issue with the body. We can still see it's transparent and it's lost a lot of its texture and its details. So we create a PNG file that's a transparent background image with a skin tone and a couple of the feet. First of all, we place that roughly where it needs to be, and then we're going to utilize a technique called puppet pins. This is a technique where we can actually put joints or pivots, anatomically speaking, where the creature's limb joints would be. By doing this, we can match the stop motion animation and the movement by adding keyframes at various points with the pins by moving them and tweaking them. On the software, we'll fill in the movement between the keyframes. Now this moves us on to one of the most technically difficult shots to update or clean up, and that mainly came down to the fact that when they were doing these visual effects they really didn't have enough time.
We would shoot tests and send them over to see if Ivan liked where we were going, and then he just took them, cut them in the movie.
There are some funky shots in Ghostbusters. We just didn't have time to finesse them.
Go on to something else.
It was real intense.
So we go back to the shot itself, and we're going to start by taking a high resolution photographed image of a Terror Dog model, which will split up into its legs and main body. After tracking the motion, we can take our model and apply a range of puppet pins so that we can animate the movement of the creature to match the creature in the original shot. Once we've done that, it's now a case of blending and blending and using motion blur and fixing the levels and the brightness and the contrast so we get something that looks a little bit more realistic. We can bring it back into Photoshop and we can start tweaking the levels and the color tinting. It needs to be more brown than grey, so we've gone ahead and done that. Then we can use an airbrush and animate plumes of dust, which further covers up the joins, and when we play it back we should have something that looks slightly more updated, or certainly cleaner. Now we move on to the next shot of the Terror Dog, and this is the sequence where it chases Louis Tully from the apartment block across the street. Having watched this shot, it's become quite apparent that the stop motion animation looks dated. But that's not to take anything away from the technicians who achieved this effect, because the animation is actually really, really good. What dates the shot is the optical composite. And as we can see looking at this shot, we have a disparity between the colour balance between the background plate and the optically composited pterodog. We can see quite a bright matte line around the outline of the dog, especially as it's coming towards the camera. So rather than use the technique that we used in the hallway, we're actually just going to clean this shot up. And we'll start by airbrushing frame by frame, almost rotoscoping, the high contrast matte line around the dog by replicating the scenery around the dog and painting it over the line. Once we've done this, we will extract the dog from the shot, and we'll do this again frame by rotoscoping it, because we're going to need a clean element of the dog to play with later on. Moving back to the beginning of the sequence, there are a few issues here. Again, we have that disparity between the colour timing. The dog seems a little too bright and the colour's a little bit off, a little bit faded. So we'll extract him and we'll bring him back in, altering the levels, the light, brightness, contrast, and the colour balance. We can also add a few subtleties, such as a drop shadow. If we look at the shot, we can see there is no shadow, that the animal casts no shadow where all the other elements in the shot do, such as the people. So we're going to add one here. In addition, just for a couple of frames, as the dog leaves the shot, we will composite a better photographic image of its face. These are extracted from the film at different frames, so it is actually moving, but it's so fleeting and it's so fast as it passes the camera, it may not register. So as you can see, here's the original. And here's the slightly cleaned up shot. And now we're going to boost the contrast, alter the colour balance. It's going to appear darker, and the colour is going to be more in keeping with how he would look compared to the lighting of the background shot or plate. The eyes are going to glow a little bit more, and it just looks slightly better. It's a little more seamless, and it's just not as obvious in terms of an optical composite.